Hello, and welcome to a very special Halloween edition of MMA Untold. My name is Taylor Gabriels. Joining me today on the podcast is the one, the only Godfather, Tim Thomas, and next to him is no one.
I feel like that's going to be pretty evident in a couple minutes here when you hear what we're doing. It's pretty clear that Zach's away and we immediately go off the rails again.
Exactly.
Last time we had like a college business lecture and like we just totally went off the rails and we're gonna strike again.
That's right. So today's episode will be unlike any we've done in the past. Part untold, part questionable decisions. This bonus Halloween episode will explore the untold story of, you guessed it, the iconic genre-changing film Halloween. And afterwards, we'll discuss the series further and give you our top 5 favorite Halloween movies of all time.
Yeah, so I'm a bit of a Halloween psycho. My uncle, when I was little, sums me and my family up, showed me Halloween when I was very, very young and became obsessed with it immediately. My uncle is the type of guy, he literally has like a Jason Voorhees costume like hanging up on his door. And like dead serious, he would legitimately go to like my aunt's house and stand outside with like a Michael Myers mask on just to creep them out. It's a really good influence.
Fun.
Really good influence. So he got me into Halloween, and I'm like that psycho that has like a million different versions of the DVD and Blu-ray. And so the minute Zach leaves, we just immediately go this route.
I can remember you and I going to the local video store in 5th or 6th grade and you getting what were the not beta, what were the
Laserdisc?
Yeah, like a Laserdisc copy of Halloween films.
Yeah, well, it's something else, man. I'm looking forward to talking about it with people, and we'll kind of get into it more as we go, but it's definitely one of those movies that never really got the respect it deserved. It's actually kind of at times like a bit of a laughing stock, and we'll go through that, why, but I'm glad that now in 2018 it really is kind of getting the respect it deserves as a series. So
right. Well, widely considered the original slasher film, John Carpenter's Halloween debuted in a single theater in Kansas City, Missouri.
What is it? The original slasher film? I mean, what is this like? Do you qualify as a slasher film?
Well, so I guess textbook definition would be a psychopath or some person that's hunting down a group of people and killing them with some sort of bladed metal object.
So you don't think, because like I always think of like, well, I know I'm already going hipster. I'm beating you to the hipster card right now because I know Deep Red, Dario Argento's Deep Red inspired this quite a bit. But I guess if you're saying widely considered, that's different than the reality, right? Because there's a few others, but maybe this is the first one that went like mainstream.
Yeah, I think that's the key here. Is that it certainly isn't the first movie to involve a knife. We'll get into it as we go here pretty quickly, but obviously Psycho involves a knife. You got Dario Argento. There was a lot of Italian horror films coming out.
Yeah, that's true.
With that, even Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's not a knife, but that preceded this by a few years. So it certainly isn't the first, but it was the one that sort of propelled that forward as a specific subgenre of horror.
That makes sense.
You know, nobody saw Psycho and immediately started mass producing movies like Psycho. After Halloween comes out, you get Friday the 13th, you get Nightmare on Elm Street, you get all these other slasher films, and it creates kind of this, you know, subgenre that still holds to this day. So
I guess, yeah, it seems like you phrased it really well because it is considered. Okay, I gotcha.
Well, 2 days after the film showed in Kansas City, it showed in LA, and a month later in Pittsburgh before eventually being released nationwide. Written by Carpenter and Deborah Hill in a mere 3 weeks, the film was originally titled The Babysitter Murders until executive producer Irwin Yablans. Am I saying that right?
That's a hell of a name.
Can't say that guy's name.
Hell of a last name.
Well, until he suggested the movie be set during Halloween. And the change in title and setting meant that Carpenter and Hill had just 3 months to write, produce, film, and edit the movie to get it out before the holiday.
That's so wild to me because that was probably just some spur of the moment thought he had. Let's just set it on Halloween. Let's call it Halloween. But ultimately, if it doesn't have a title like Halloween, I know it'll, we'll talk about the anthology thing and all of that, but you can't have the Babysitter Murders 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and have all the twists and turns it goes down. It's just like, it wouldn't have worked at all. What a decision that was.
This movie is just full of those sort of unique happenings, like somebody coming up with something last minute. We'll see when we get to The Mask how that evolves and becomes what it is. I mean, there's a lot of these little small changes on the fly that end up being major components of the film. So it's wild. I mean, nowadays films take a year, 2 years to write and film and edit, and this thing took 3 months total for everything, start to finish.
It's also, I always love it, the crazy inspiration. Like right now, the first thing that came to mind is just like when they, was it Toby Hooper or whatever came up with the idea for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because he's like waiting in line and he literally is like, I just want to take a chainsaw down and just kill all these people. And he like, puts it together. And I know they say it's based on a true story, this, that, whatever, but that was his true inspiration for it. And it's always interesting to me to see how these people get these inspirations and just like what it turns into, because a spur of the moment thing like him waiting in line, or this where it's like, let's change the title from The Babysitter Murders to Halloween, changed everything, honestly.
And I'm going to be totally honest with you here. The Babysitter Murders sounds really, I don't want to say corny, but it sounds pretty corny and cliche. But you know what else sounds cliche? Hey, Halloween, we'll set it on Halloween and we'll also title the film Halloween. Not very inspired if you really think about it. But holy cow, did it hold? Like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
That's weighty.
Right. A Nightmare on Elm Street.
A Nightmare on Elm Street. Halloween.
I guess on paper, it's Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th
is sort of shitty.
It's the same
because
thing.
Because it's like, it's worked.
The same thing. Yeah. It's true. Identical.
It's true. But they carry weight because of what they became. But on the surface, Friday the 13th is just like, well.
I mean, it almost would have been better to call it All Hallows Eve.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a little more.
It's just crazy what it becomes, though, because now it's fucking perfect.
Don't kill me, listeners. I'm not suggesting that this should have been called something different. I'm just saying that on the surface, if you would have been around at the time, say you would have had influence over that, I just would have been like, hey, guys.
Yeah, I feel like
you're a little more creative.
I feel like you can relate too, because obviously, you've written book and horror book, and the titling process is a nightmare. So you can kind of relate to that you don't want to overthink it too much, but it's everything.
That's the key. You with a title, especially for writers, you almost want to get cheeky and a little bit meta with it, but you can't, because the title is the first thing that people are going to see. It is what's going to sell your book or your movie. It's the first thing.
Absolutely.
So Halloween, I mean, you know what you're getting yourself into with that movie.
It totally works. I mean, it's weird though. It is so basic, but it's been perfect and it's aged incredibly well.
So let's talk a little bit about the casting and the dialogue. So Hill and Carpenter were, for lack of a better term, lovers, or they were together at the time of writing this. And a lot of the inspiration for characters, at least the names of the characters, come from both of their personal backgrounds, from acquaintances, friends, etc. The name of the town comes from where Deborah Hill is from Haddonfield, New Jersey, although they said it in Illinois. And then in particular, Hill writing most of the dialogue for the female characters. And that was a very important aspect of this film.
I think it absolutely is, because at this time in horror, and to be honest, it's a struggle even to this day, is a lot of times having the relatable teens or whatever. Let's just say, for example, for some of the horror nuts out there, Rob Zombie's, not Devil's Reject, House of a Thousand Corpses. People shit on that movie because they say that none of the characters in it are likable, and you end up rooting for the villains. Well, this is an awesome example of someone coming in and writing relatable dialogue that even, creating the strong female lead that people can really get behind and support. And ultimately, it adds layers to the film, because this isn't just like a root for Michael, root against the teens. Now you really feel for them. You know what I mean? And you can tell she knew what she was doing. And ultimately, this ends up becoming an issue. Writing strong dialogue becomes an issue even for Halloween, because by the time Rob Zombie gets his hands on it, people shit on the way he had the teens talk. You know what I mean?
And I some people are probably going to turn this podcast off right here. 3, 2, 1. We're actually fans of Rob Zombie's interpretation of Halloween.
Should save that for the end after they.
I know. It felt appropriate right now, but that is one of the criticisms. One of the key criticisms is his, lack of believable dialogue. And it wasn't just important for the film. It was important for the horror genre as a whole to have a very strong female lead. And this sort of, again, if you want to say this is kind of the catalyst for slasher films becoming popularized, this is also one of the catalysts for strong lead female characters becoming a predominant thing. And it doesn't happen a ton right after this, but it shows its face in the 90s and especially today. We see it a lot more.
Well, you're exactly right, too, because think about it, man. Like, when you think back on those original horror movies, a lot of people, your casual fans, of course, everybody knows the villain, but not a lot of people can name the lead female or the final survivor. But, the vast majority of the people know Laurie Strode. They know Laurie Strode, just like they know Sidney Prescott from Scream. So Look what happens when you write like a strong female lead. It carries a lot of weight with people. So I just think there's an impact even all these years later, But a lot of people ask them to name the lead from Nightmare on Elm Street. They don't know. They really don't know, Friday the 13th, same thing. They don't know. So.
That's a very good point. Well, speaking of the cast of the film was relatively unknown, save for Donald Pleasance, who played Dr. Sam Loomis. And though he claimed to not really understand the movie when he first read the script, Pleasance took the role because his daughter was a fan of Carpenter's previous film, Assault on Precinct 13. Now, while many will recognize the name Sam Loomis from Hitchcock's famed masterpiece Psycho, which we talked about earlier, there are more connections than you may be aware of. And in particular, the lead actress who we were just talking about. Yeah,
she's actually, Jamie Lee Curtis is actually Janet Leigh's daughter from Psycho, which is just absolutely insane.
And Janet Leigh is the famous shower scene,
the infamous shower scene, speaking of things that terrorize people. That's a scene that'll haunt you forever, That's the shit that hangs with you, though. That's what we love about horror. Is it's almost like the Final Destination effect. Is every day I'm driving down the road and you get behind a big vehicle with like any type of cargo, and you always think of Final Destination. You're like, I gotta get out of this fucking lane.
And it's funny you say that because Carpenter talks a lot in interviews about creating that sort of mood that lingered with the audience when they left the theater, and that was really what he was trying to create with the film. There wasn't a lot of blood in the film, hardly any, in fact, and it was shot on such a low budget, but he was able to create this mood that lingered with people in a way that Hitchcock was also able to do in a way that, Suspiria and Deep Red and things like that do.
Somebody tweeted recently, they're like, just went and rewatched the original Halloween for the first time in 15 years or something, and they said something along the lines of like, it wasn't nearly as terrifying as I remembered. And then it's like, but I then spent the next 72 hours convinced there's a murderer in my house going to kill me. So it's one of those things where as you're watching it, it's true. There's not as many jump scares as maybe you remember, not as much blood as maybe you remember, but it actually ends up hanging with you. It's almost like The Strangers, where you're just always convinced there's just like someone kind of off to your right.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like I can't really see what's behind that door, but like, what did something just move?
Yes.
And that's what's actually terrifying. That's why some of them, like your Jason Voorhees, it's like, the supernatural guy at a campgrounds just doesn't really scare me, but a guy standing behind a bush in my neighborhood, like that's actually terrifying. You know what I mean?
And you don't need the jump scares and the gore and the things that a lot of movies cheaply lean on these days.
Yeah, absolutely.
And don't get me wrong, if you go back and watch Halloween, in terms of holding up, the movie itself holds up well, but we've been so oversaturated and overexposed to gore of real gore on the news, and then obviously as far as they can take it in horror films today. So it doesn't hit you the same way it did somebody watching it in the theater in the 70s. But like you said, of that person, it will hang with you.
Oh, absolutely.
It will linger, which is powerful.
Yeah, that's horror at its best.
So, an independent film with a budget of $320,000, Halloween would go on to gross over $70 million in its initial release, making it the most profitable indie film of all time until 1999, when the Blair Witch Project came out.
Yeah, where do you go with this? First of all, somewhere at the Blair Witch. No, just first of all, the $320,000. Holy shit, man! That is just, and you don't even feel it when you watch it. Honestly, it seems like they had the money. He's just unbelievable at using it perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure, this is a sort of touching the surface of this untold story, and we were tempted to really dive deep into this, but this was at the request of a listener, so we're just trying this out. If you like it, we can definitely do more of this in the future, and we can certainly dive full on into this, but without going into it, Carpenter's work with the camera and what he had at his disposal, he's creating something out of nothing, really.
Yeah, his ability, again, we'll get into the wardrobe and stuff as we go here, but like what they did to just cut every corner they could, the mask, everything they pulled was perfect. And I mean, what wasn't it supposed to be $300,000, and then they had to pay Pleasance an extra $20,000?
Yeah.
Watch out! But they all worked for nothing.
Yeah, I mean, all of them made peanuts. Pleasance was definitely the only sort of big known actor. Jamie Lee Curtis worked in television.
And the actor playing Michael made like $25 a day.
$25 a day.
Ooh, I mean that.
Who was Carpenter's friend? Actually, 3 different people played Myers, but he was the predominant. Role there, but
is that legal? $25 a day?
In the 70s,
was he drawing another salary?
In the 70s, that's like $50 a day today.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a livable wage, my friend.
Jeez,
barely, but yeah. So Pleasance got his own Winnebago. He was the diva.
Baller status.
He was the diva of the set.
Watch out in the Winnebago.
He had a rider of like a Gatorade and a bottle of water or something.
That was it.
But yeah, so this was really just, like I said, just making magic with very little. And the Blair Witch Project felt the same way, which is funny that it would be the one to bump it from the throne. Can you name any other independent movies that maybe trumped Blair Witch? Just quizzing you on the spot here.
Let me think. So, top Blair Witch?
Yes.
Paranormal Activity?
Boom. You nailed it. God, it's like I gave you the answer or something. You're going to
now
make the listeners
think you did.
I know. I did not.
The best part is you specifically go, I'm going to have a question. I don't want you to know.
I told you before we recorded.
Yeah.
I am not going to tell you the answer to this.
See, that's why I hope the listeners do end up liking something like this, because there's just so many roads you want to go down. Like Paranormal Activity, there's a million. We could spend 15 minutes on that right now. I mean,
talk about making a masterpiece out of nothing.
And then it's just the classic shame of horror where they kind of wrote it into the ground. And then Halloween suffers a similar fate where you start to just cash checks. You just start to, hey, it's the next Halloween, we got to get another movie out. Yeah. I mean, remember the old, if it's Halloween, it's got to be Saw like slogan where they were just every year there was a Saw movie.
What Saw are we on at this point?
Oh, well, we've like started over with Jigsaw. Like they like.
But what they end at?
I think it was 7. I think we're at 8 now, maybe.
Yeah. It's getting up there
for
a film that's not that old.
They just run them into the ground, man.
So in terms of horror, by the way, horror is, just for those listening that don't know, it is the genre that produces the greatest return on investment of any film genre. They get made for next to nothing, and they bring in tons of money.
That's why you always do have to fear them going back to the well, even with something like The Descent or whatever, where the interpretation would lead to it being almost impossible to do a sequel. The actual interpretation that the director guides you to and says, this is the reality. And then it's like, here comes The Descent too, because of money.
Did you see The Descent too?
No.
It wasn't horrible.
Really?
Yeah,
I
it really wasn't horrible.
never watched it because I mean, nah, I'd sound like a hipster if I said this, but I mean, I was discouraged when you hear the director say you should interpret it. I won't, for spoilers' sake, I won't say anything, but he says you should interpret it this way, and then a sequel comes out that would basically contradict that.
Sure.
That's hard for me.
Yeah. No, it is.
But no, but you're right. I mean, I know you weren't the biggest fan of A Quiet Place, but A Quiet Place, immediately they're going right back to the well. And as someone who did love A Quiet Place, you immediately get a little concerned about a sequel because you're like, listen, just leave it alone.
Hopefully they move by the water this time where they can talk as loud as they want to.
Watch your mouth.
Sorry.
Let's not do this. Back to Halloween. Derail. Yeah.
All right.
Watch your mouth.
All right. Well, set in Haddonfield, Illinois, the film was shot on location in Pasadena and Hollywood, California. And with the tight budget, the crew had to use several garbage bags full of leaves to create the feeling of fall in the Midwest. And after each scene, they would gather the leaves, stuff them back in the bag, and reuse them the next day.
I love this. That's incredible. This is where, again, that's why I don't get Tim from the couch doesn't get to make movies. Because I just wouldn't even think of that shit, first of all, let alone, and let alone the idea to just sit there and be like, all right, cool, bag them up, move them to the next place. How their ability to improvise is just amazing.
The cast and crew, they were all young. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis was 19 at the time. A lot of the crew was in their late teens, early 20s. But they really came together on this, and I don't think I have it in my notes, but you and I were talking about it earlier in terms of the order of filming that last day. They filmed that first scene, and it was impressive why they did that.
Yeah, because the Myers house they used was an abandoned home, or didn't a church own it or something like that?
Church owned the property, but it was an abandoned
decrepit,
home. Yep.
So yeah, they did it in the end because they had to spend days painting it and cleaning it all up to make it look like a livable home so they could do it then, which is crazy in itself.
So I'm just picturing like the sound guy painting a house. You know,
well, that's where again
that wasn't in the job description.
Yeah, I was just gonna say where I'd be such a diva if I was like an actor and actress. I'd be like, I'm not here to restore houses. Like I'd be such an asshole, and they just came together and made it happen, man.
Yeah, even to the point of buying their own clothes and wardrobe for the film. So there was nothing in the budget for them to buy their own clothes. So they bought them from local department stores.
JCPenney.
Yeah, JCPenney. So I'm drawing
Jamie Lee Curtis?
Yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis bought her wardrobe from JCPenney's for under $100.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
But it shows, again, what can be done. You know, if you know you have a wonderful story, it should be an inspiration for anybody out there. It's almost like the Kevin Smith Clerks thing. He just maxed out some credit cards, used the video store he worked at, the convenience store he worked at, and just, you can make shit happen.
You know what's funny you say that? I don't want to get off track here, but some of my favorite writers in film, and Kevin Smith being one of them, have done this exact thing. I think of, God, I'm drawing a blank on his name, but I think of Dazed and Confused.
Oh, your boy.
Yeah, I know. Why am I blanking on his name? Linklater. Yeah.
There you go.
I don't know why I blanked on his name, but yeah, Richard Linklater, same thing.
Yep.
I mean, there's a documentary out on that movie. I think you can even find it on YouTube. If you're just into film, you should really watch that documentary because you're talking same thing as this, just taking nothing and turning it into something special.
And I think you told me one time, like the random McConaughey thing from that, where they just like found him.
He was hanging out at a bar. He was a film student, and he was only supposed to have 2 lines in the film, I think.
That's that amazing.
And they evolved it as it went and wrote more lines for him. Sort of like, they sort of evolved with this story as it went as well.
Crazy.
It's fantastic. So, we should mention here too that the leaves, because this is sort of funny. So the leaves they bought fake leaves, they painted them, they spread them on the ground, but the leaves on the trees were green.
Whoops.
And Carpenter wanted to go in post-production and change it, but they didn't have any money in the budget to do that. So there's big inconsistencies in the film. There's parts in the film where I can't remember his name, but he trips over the dolly that's holding the camera, and they just keep the shot.
They roll with it.
They keep it.
I feel like that's one of those things, if you're somebody like Carpenter, that would drive you fucking insane. Even like 30 years later, you'd be like, God, the leaves. Can we go back and change it?
You can even see a palm tree, I think, in one of the scenes. So it's just...
I feel like one of the rumored stories, because this year they just put another movie out, and it's a direct sequel to this first one. And one of the stories is that they wanted to reshoot the final scene, right? But the reason I'm bringing that up is John Carpenter himself shot it down. He's like, listen, just leave it alone. Change whatever you need to change. We can use some dialogue to make it things be the way you want them to be. But he's like, we can't reshoot things. But I do feel like at the same time he was thinking that, he's like, but what if we do? We could change the leaves.
Well, they shot additional footage for the sequel, right?
Yeah.
When this one was going to TV.
Yes.
Because they had to cut some nudity scenes and I think one scene that had some gore in it. And so they couldn't fill the 2-hour time slot. So they shot additional stuff while shooting Halloween 2, which is it's pretty cool.
It blows my mind that they have to do shit we can't make it work, guys. We have to add 12 hey, network. You've got Halloween, this smash hit. You really got to have 12 more minutes?
And I'm sure there's advertisers vying for more space.
Can't we do one of those bullshit narrator things in the beginning? Have Jamie Lee Curtis come out and say hi and introduce Halloween for 5 minutes and afterwards say, what'd you think? Okay, can't we do some bullshit there?
Maybe. I suppose you think it could have been just a cut issue, cutting from one scene and jumping to the next without a smooth transition.
Yeah, well, what pisses me off, if you want me to go into it, what pisses me off about it is the scenes they added foreshadow quite a bit that eventually, they will end up, Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie and Michael will end up being brother and sister. That's not in the original movie, as again, it was not necessarily supposed to be a series. But the scenes they added foreshadow that. So it literally changes quite a bit the first movie just for a network. That sets me off.
It seems like a bit much.
I feel like I'm wearing your fedora, the hipster fedora for this, but it pisses me off.
Don't worry. I'll get hipster when we give our top 5.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that. So we've talked budget, we've talked cast, setting, but we can't leave out, I would say, possibly the two most iconic things when it comes to Halloween and specifically Mike Myers, and that's the mask and the theme music. Now, as for the mask, it was never intended to be in the movie at all. For the music, that was all Carpenter and his father.
I didn't know this. I did not until you want to go ahead, because you actually brought this to my attention, where that comes from. That's
so the music was a 5/4, I believe it was a 5/4 exercise on bongos. So his father Carpenter's father bought him a pair of bongos, and it was an exercise that Carpenter was doing to learn to play bongos. And he recorded the song, what was it, in an hour?
God.
The whole thing, I think, was done in 3 days. The whole soundtrack, the whole score. But that particular iconic song was done in an hour. And it was just a hearkening back to playing some exercise on the bongos.
Hey, Mr. Carpenter, I hope you're proud of yourself. We went to... we took my daughter to a trunk or treat thing, where you go around, you go to everybody the trunk of their car and they decorate it. Have you ever done this?
No.
It's one of the
Sounds
things.
Horrifying.
No, it's all good. It's totally legit. So you take them and families decorate their vehicles and they do themes. And it's funny because there was this, so somebody did a Ghostbusters one, and then somebody did Beauty and the Beast, and then you walk up to dress up and they give candy to the kids, And so it's a safe way instead of going to random strangers' houses.
Oh, okay. That's
which we'll still do that anyways, but this is, a way to do it. Well, one of them there had this nice, beautiful little Halloween setup with the pumpkins, and it was all it was beautiful. And my wife, just starts walking past it. My daughter gets her candy, and then I hear that they're blasting the Halloween music, and I'm like, hey man, this is too dark of an exhibit for the 2-year-olds. But then again, we are talking about my daughter who was into the Jason Voorhees, the neighbor, last year.
Oh, so trust me, I haven't forgotten that.
She was all in, but I was just that music carries weight in any setting. They immediately went to the Halloween theme, and it really was just a nice, just pumpkins and fall setup. It was no horror related, and yet that music's playing, and I'm like, hey, you son of a bitch.
I would say it's one of the 3 most famous songs in horror, and I say 3 because I have 3 specific ones in mind, that being one of them. Can you think of any other really, truly iconic songs?
Not like the Kiki Mama, like the Jason,
right? Not
yes,
that. Right. Although that's worth noting. Just just to save air.
And not the Suspiria music?
I would say Suspiria. Yeah, that
was that one
opening
of your three?
Suspiria. Yes, yep. I would say that's in
good
there.
Old Goblin. What else did you have?
The other one's a Steven Spielberg movie.
Well,
you wouldn't think.
Well, you saying horror?
Yeah.
What is it?
Jaws.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Good call. Yeah.
I would say those three, and that's just off the top. If you're screaming at your iPhone or car that there's more, sorry, but yeah, just off the top.
No, that's a good point.
Those three. So it's up there as obviously one of the most iconic songs in all of horror. And The Mask.
Can we please?
Yeah, please talk about The Mask.
Most people know the Captain Kirk thing. That there is a Captain. Everybody knows that they found a Captain Kirk mask at a local convenience store, or local department store, convenience store, whatever.
I think it was a toy store or something.
Okay, there you go.
That.
It was like $2 or something.
Yeah, $1.98.
Stripped it of the eyebrows and just kind of like opened up the eyes a little bit, and they made that the mask.
The original script had a description of Michael Myers as a sort of generic, faceless kind of character. So
what they don't know is the mask that made it in second place that they almost went with, which was a clown named Weary Willie, which again, we were so close to either the best thing or worst thing to ever happen to the series.
Weary Willie sounds like a character from a Rob Zombie film.
It does.
Doesn't it?
Straight
Feels
up.
like a character from a zombie film.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, well, you never know. That's incredible. Weary Willie. I actually didn't know the Weary Willie story.
I didn't know that at all, no.
So, but yeah, that's phenomenal. But yeah, I mean, what an iconic mask. That's what I love about horror, man, is just spur of the moment decision. And now you can't go anywhere without seeing that thing. I mean, it's just, again, one of the most, speaking of top threes, that's one of the most iconic horror masks, period.
Oh, for sure.
You know,
Jason.
So, yeah, it's
Mike Myers. Yeah. Scream. I don't
yeah,
know.
Ghostface. People will hate on
Ghostface?
Scream all they want, but Ghostface is really iconic. But crazy shit.
All right, so Halloween's success seemed kismet, but few could have predicted just how successful and influential the film would go on to be. Today, the Halloween series totals 11 films in all. Yet, despite its monstrous impact and initial success, the series was never meant to be more than one movie, and you kind of alluded to this.
Yeah, I mean, look, they were going to be called The Babysitter Murders or whatever. They literally intended this to be one quick thing. They agreed to do the second one because of the money, and then they were immediately, as soon as that didn't make as much money as the original, they started to decide they were going to go in a different direction. They were going to do the anthology thing. Part 3, Season of the Witch, is very polarizing. It's better than it was given credit for at the time, because most people saw how Michael Myers wasn't in it, myself included, when I was younger, and we're just like, fuck this is shit. It's like the Haunted Mask, like Goosebumps Haunted Mask. When in reality, if you give it a good solid look, you look back on it, it's good. Now it's getting too much of a following. I think slash film,
it's a little too hipster now.
Somebody put out the Halloween movies in order, the best from worst to best, and somebody put that ahead of Halloween 2, which is pretty wild.
I love slash film.
Yeah, me too.
But that is garbage.
Ridiculous.
Yes.
I mean, I'll let you put it in your top 4. That's fine, because like we said earlier, there are some bad Halloween movies, but putting that ahead of Halloween 2, to me, 1 and 2 are untouchable.
Yeah, 1, 2, and H2O, of course. Those are untouchable films.
I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis came out recently and literally said she regrets H2O and she was just cashing a check, sir.
No, someone paid her to say that.
Surprised you didn't bring up Resurrection, Buster Rhymes.
I can't support
that. Trick or treat, motherfucker. Didn't we see that in the theater, opening weekend?
We
probably.
Sure did. And no regrets either.
No, not one.
All right, so there you have it. That's pretty much the short and sweet of it. Like we said, there's obviously more to this, but did we miss anything? Is there anything you do want to touch on?
I just as a fan, I just want to say, kind of what I was saying earlier. The series, as you grew up, it was always Freddy, Jason, and then Michael Myers. And those were considered the powerhouses, but Michael Myers was always a distant third. And you were considered, again, the being a weirdo or just trying to be different if you liked Halloween instead. But the reality is, Halloween has been the one that has been able to kind of hang with it because there are layers to it. In the end, Friday the 13th is the same shit. Just change, when they start running out of ideas, they just change location. Nightmare on Elm Street, that went to pure shit. That became a comedy thing. Freddy got larger than life on MTV. That fell apart completely.
Felt like that one had a lot of potential.
Yes.
But didn't come
and
through.
Even again, that's an awesome story when Craven gets back involved and you start doing like New Nightmare and shit. And they found a way, they tried. But the thing with Halloween was it really was telling a story. Like, did the story have a lot of weird twists and turns that it, kind of go off the rails a little bit? Absolutely. But it's really cool to me that in the end now, that as they're doing this direct sequel, yes, they're shitting on the rest of the series, which kind of sucks because there was some cool additions to the mythology as the series went along, but it is it's shattering records right now. It's the best Halloween opening ever for the series. I'm saying, I don't know if that it's the top Halloween opening of all time, but what I'm saying is they're shattering records for themselves. People are already asking for another one, and it's really cool to see it kind of get its spot. Because right now it's more relevant than Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th. And for somebody that's been a lifelong fan, that's an awesome feeling.
And we were very skeptical when we heard the news of a new movie being made, and especially who it was being made by.
Yeah, was it Danny?
Yeah.
The hell, fucking Kenny Powers. What the hell's Kenny Powers' name? Now I'm drawing a Danny McBride. You're like, man, well, it's funny that we've gotten however long into this without bringing up the Akkad family, but they basically wreaked havoc on the series. And it's funny because you go through and do all this research and they don't come up like one time, but they were like, the executive producers, they had the rights and everything. And they took it down a lot of weird roads. This is a series. And again, maybe this is where if we ever get to do the full on episode, you can kind of talk about that they followed a lot of those trends, resurrections during that like reality TV or, era. So they bring in Busta Rhymes and a bunch of kids that look like they're from MTV, and they go into to Michael's house and they shoot a reality show.
Got Josh Hartnett, right?
Without
in one
H2O,
of them.
yeah.
In H2O.
Yeah. Literally the fact that Busta Rhymes is in one of them is unreal. So they really blew it. So it's cool that in the end, they got it right, and now it's shattering records, and maybe it'll kind of get like the respect it deserves.
I certainly hope so, because it deserves it, obviously, and it just you can, like I said, you can still throw on that original film today, and there's a lot to take in, and hopefully, now that you know some of the behind the scenes stuff, you can appreciate it even more.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then, there's a certain fondness for the series as a whole, even for the movies that weren't great. You can still throw those on and smile. I feel like as cheesy as Resurrection was, there's certain aspects of it that are still nostalgic and fun. And if you're a super tight, I must have my horror be perfect and be true to this and that, then that's not for you. But for me, and this would be our segue into our top 5, for me, it's very important to have fun when I'm watching horror. I want it to scare me. I want it to evoke the feelings and dread that it's supposed to, but I ultimately want to enjoy it. If it's a miserable experience, I don't want anything to do with it. If it's so scary that it literally makes me miserable watching it, I'm not a fan. I'm out. And I don't want cheeseball stuff, but I want something kind of in the middle, in between that. So let's get into it. Let's dive into our top 5 favorite horror movies.
And just one quick last thought before we go into our top 5. I do want to say to anybody, there might be some casual people that download this because it's Halloween that don't listen to our podcast. And just so you know, like you said earlier, this was just kind of a brief look at some quick research. Like we alluded to, we love the Rob Zombie movies. We didn't spend hardly any time on them. Just so you know, that's because this is a quick, if we were to ever go into this, we would spend plenty of time on shit like that. We know they're there. We love them. We defend them, actually, including Rob Zombie's sequel. We defend that too. But again, this is just a quick overview of the first movie. And so if we ever decide to do another horror episode, we would be looking a little more deeply into things like that. We didn't forget about Rob Zombie's movies. We actually love them. So I know that's why we probably lost a lot of people earlier.
I was going to say those people aren't listening at this time, but that's okay.
But no, so top 5.
So yeah, but first I want to give a caveat. These 5 movies are not what we believe to be the scariest movies of all time. They're not what we believe to be objectively the best horror movies of all time. These are simply our personal favorites. And when I say personal favorites, I'm thinking of something that I would want to show someone else, something that I would go back to and watch, something that I remember fondly. And for me, something that I had fun and enjoyed watching.
Sure.
So let's start at the bottom.
Okay. Number 4.
And I want you to go first before I give my hipster answer.
Okay, so, well, I guess most people consider mine a hipster answer. My number 5 is Frailty, which we loved.
Yes.
If you consider it a horror, which I think you have to. But I mean, man, God's Hand Killer, man. Come on. It's awesome.
You have to consider that a horror movie.
Anybody that hasn't seen Frailty, go see that shit, man. It's still one of them a lot of people don't know about.
It's a damn shame, too.
Out of control. But just an awesome movie. So
another movie that used no blood and just pure tense, intensity and tenseness to, I don't even know if that's a word. Just, it just used mood to create a sense of dread, which was wonderful.
Yeah, just an awesome story. Go ahead. Number 5?
Number 5 for me is The Guest.
Okay, all right. I mean, it's good. It's
you
really
did not
good.
see that coming.
I did not. All right. I loved it, but
top 5, and I'll tell you why. Because I haven't had that much fun watching a movie with a big old smile on my face in a long, long time. And that movie, and not to talk about my own writing again, but that movie does what I love. It takes 2 genres and merges them together and literally splits them down the middle. And you remember that movie when you walk away from it. It's not scary, but it's just got all the elements that I love out of any story. And it just so happens the second half happens to be a horror.
Doesn't it have like a little homage to Halloween 3? Aren't there like the masks?
It does in the very end. Yeah. Yes.
Hey, that one to me was almost like a little bit like From Dusk Till Dawn, where it's like the 2 movies where like the first half of From Dusk Till Dawn is like the action and then it's horror. The Guest, like you're waiting because you know it's horror, but it like you're waiting for it to happen, and the second half kind of gets going. And you're like, oh Jesus, okay, it is. I
love movie and Dusk Till Dawn. Holy cow,
another classic. Yeah. I gotcha. That was a good one.
All right. Sorry. Got my hipster answer out of the way.
Man, these lists are out of control because my number 4 is Cabin in the Woods. We're full on hipster mode.
Well, okay. I'm going to spoil then. Number 3 is Cabin in the Woods for me.
Okay. So not far off.
Yes.
Oh man. That movie, I just hate it because as I talk through things, I realize how we sound like a psychopath, but it's so meta. If you get into Cabin in the Woods, if you're a horror fan and you haven't seen Cabin in the Woods, you need to watch it immediately for the meaning. It's awesome on its own, let alone the meta meaning behind the whole damn thing.
And I would argue that if you didn't like it, there's a strong chance that you did not understand it. And I don't mean that in a pretentious way.
Arguments against it where people will be like, I've literally heard people be like, it's just another cliche movie, they're like, it's another Cabin in the Woods movie, and you're like, that's like the whole thing,
right? Yeah.
Fuck. That's called Cabin in the Woods.
Yes. If you did not like the movie, go read about what the movie really is and then rewatch it.
Outstanding.
And you might have a new appreciation for it. Okay. So that was your number 4, yep. My number 3. So then your
number 4, yeah.
Yeah, my number 4 is Scream.
Okay.
A lot of the same reasons. Had a lot of fun watching it. Has one of the most iconic opening scenes to any horror film. And really the thing that put it on the list for me is, and I would have to go back and look because I may be talking out of my rear here, but when that movie came out, I felt like horror was literally dying on the floor.
It was.
At the time. I cannot remember from the 5 years before that movie anything that I enjoyed.
You're 100% right. Because Ghost, they really did bring it back. And because then all like I know you did last summer, a bunch of like urban legend, like a bunch of things came out in very similar vein, but that one was the smartest. And it was, the swerve to use like Drew Barrymore as the face of it, literally the name on the marquee, and to kill her in the opening scene was brilliant.
So much. I would love to do an Untold on that.
Yeah. And that move has come back. I won't say too much for any listener that hasn't seen the movie, but that move has come back recently, and it works. That marketing one way and then a huge swerve right off the bat, it gets people every time. Because right off the bat, you're on your heels. You're like, wait, what? Like, what's going on? And
that's back-to-back movies in my list that pay homage to horror, but also kind of make fun of it a little tongue-in-cheek with it, too.
Now I'm fired up about Scream because this is another one like Halloween where like people shit on a lot of Halloween movies in the middle. And like, I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of bad ones in there, but a lot of them don't deserve it. Like Rob Zombie's didn't deserve to be shit on. You know, some of them, like, I even think some of them were just way better than people thought. But the Scream series, I feel like one was, you know, for horror, borderline perfect. It was a great movie. And two, let a lot of people down. It wasn't that bad. It was just it let people down. And then I thought they did a good job with 3 and 4.
3 came back pretty strong.
And people shit on those. They say it just derailed after the first one. I'm like, no, man, for horror, that's really good stuff.
It does kind of parallel Halloween, too, because 4, was it 4 that gets
they kind of
meta? Or it like,
isn't that Scream was always the stab, like the movie.
Right, but weren't they, with the stab movie,
yeah,
I
they
guess.
were always doing that
that's
shit.
True.
But by 4, it was like, wasn't it, there was like younger kids back and they were the older, you know, but it was a really good series, man.
I enjoyed it.
So I don't hate on that at all. We're at my number 3, right?
No, we're at number 2, both.
Well, no,
you didn't give your number 3.
My number 3, here comes the cliche train over here. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is awesome. Okay. I think, here's the thing. If you're a kid and you go watch like Friday the 13th, you get exactly what you're expecting to get yourself into. You know, Jason's like a bunch of super gory kills. It's funny. It's like the random teens getting drunk and having sex. It's exactly what you expect. Same thing with Nightmare on Elm Street. It's way over the top. Then you go, so you're like going through, right? You're like, we're at like middle school Tim right now. You're like going through all these, and then you get to Texas Chainsaw Massacre and you turn it on. You're like, oh, I can't wait to see Leatherface. And then you just get fucking smacked in the face by that family and that house, and there's a lot of screaming and a horrible environment, and you're just terrified. And like Leatherface is like the least of your goddamn concerns. So, you talked a little bit earlier about like you have to enjoy it or be comfortable and not be miserable and uncomfortable. That movie made me uncomfortable, and I wasn't prepared for it. Like, I was like, oh, wait, I think this is what horror is, you know? Just like, again, going back to Michael standing outside behind a bush and just being like, wait, is there somebody there? This was like, Jesus Christ, I feel terrible for the... And then when you end up hearing the stories about the production, it was production hell. You know, they say that one of the screams in the end of Texas Chainsaw Massacre sounds so real because the woman, they had to do a reshoot, and when she found that out, she was screaming for real. She was horrified because she just wanted out so bad because she was in hell.
Dang, that's crazy.
So it translates to the screen. So that's one of those, it hangs with me forever because it's just, and then even, the remake was awesome. I know that one, they went into Leatherface a lot more, but man, that was badass too. So yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre had to be on there.
All right, that's fair enough. Yeah, well, my 3 was Cabin in the Woods. So now we're at number 2.
Suspiria. I love Suspiria.
Yeah.
It's just anybody that hasn't seen it yet, you're going to get a remake here any day now. I think it's this year, next year is the Suspiria remake.
Yes.
Sounds like they're doing it justice. Somebody we like and respect. I don't remember if it was Kevin Smith or Quentin Tarantino or somebody said it made him cry. Like, it was fucked up.
Wow.
So watch out. But yeah, Suspiria is awesome. The atmosphere. I've never seen anything like the opening of Suspiria where you turn it on and you're immediately horrified when the music starts up and the imagery. It's just out of control. Dario Argento was a goddamn nightmare factory, man.
That would make my top 3 best horror movies. For sure. And it's in my honorable mentions on my top 5.
And it has one of my top. I think when I was watching that, I jumped like 15 feet out of my fucking bed at one scene in that. And I just remember being like, Jesus Christ, I'm miserable. Like, this is horror. Like, this is, we have like, I know like, we watch horror for different reasons, but I just remember like, Jesus, like, I'm jarred to the core, man.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
Did you see the new Suspiria poster? The Mondo
Was
one?
it Mondo? I did see Mondo. It was pretty cool.
Ooh, that's nice. Yeah. I haven't really gravitated towards a Mondo poster in a little while here, but that one...
They just did a Shining one that's actually really badass too. Like,
nice.
Really, it's him on the tricycle. It's awesome.
Oh, nice. Very good. All right, number 2 for me.
Okay.
Not going to be a popular one. Trick or Treat.
Okay, no, it's awesome.
I love that movie. My wife and I watch that every Halloween without fail. Good. We love it. It's so much fun. Again, I keep using that word, which would really annoy a lot of horror fans, but yeah, Trick or Treat. There's a clear theme with my list. All of these pay homage to the whole genre. They're all fun. They all have completely different elements at different points of the film. They're not just one fluid story. Cabin in the Woods is all over the place. Scream is pretty much all over the place. This is obviously 3 different major stories with one thread kind of running through it. I like that kind of stuff.
I don't think you should get shit on for saying it's fun, because I think that there is a lot of horror. Like, I think that Friday the 13th model is fun. It's a fun movie. It's campy. You know what you're getting yourself into. Nightmare on Elm Street took it too far. It got too fun. You know what I mean? Freddy became a goddamn comedian. So horror a lot of times does go down that fun route. It's just the horror that I gravitate to is a little bit like more unsettling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't know. So I get it. I totally get it. And I think a lot of people dig that too.
Yeah.
So
yeah, different. It's good. We don't have the exact same list, even though we have a couple that are the same.
No, well, my number one is going to be it's
boy.
Halloween. It's
is it Halloween?
It's just goes. I mean, it's the movie that got me into horror. I watched it a million times growing up. I've been defending it for an eternity. It's just awesome, man. He's like,
I couldn't decide between Halloween 1 and 2, so I left them both off my list.
And went with Halloween 3.
No.
You son of a bitch. I'm just kidding. Damn it.
No, but I wanted to put both of them on the list. But there's only room for 5, so I couldn't put one on and not the other because I really like both of those movies a lot.
I mean,
so I don't fault you at all for that.
What's the last horror movie to create? God, I can't believe it's like probably a Rob Zombie movie. What's one of the last horror movies to create like 3 iconic characters? I mean, Michael Myers is iconic, Laurie Strode, Dr. Loomis. People know all of them. Most people just know Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger,
and they really don't even know Jason. They do, but they don't even really know the first movie, the first 2 movies.
Yeah. But it just, there's so many layers as the story developed. I know it went to shit, and I know a lot of people had issues with where it went, but to me, it's the best, man. The music, everything about it. I just love that goddamn creep show hiding in the corner, just sitting there. It just still creeps me out. Like I brought up The Strangers earlier. That thing, just the guy, almost like Hush. Remember Hush?
Yeah, Hush was great.
It's just because she can't hear, and he's just like in the background. I'm like, God, that fucking creeps me out so much, man. It's great. So Halloween.
All right, I like it. My number 1 was your number 5. So Frailty is it's my favorite. It's my favorite movie of all time. So.
Full on favorite movie.
Full on favorite movie of all time. Yeah, I just, and there's probably a certain amount of nostalgia with it. But I can just remember watching that, being excited for it, but then watching it and just loving everything about the movie. Everything about there wasn't a lot of times I can watch a movie and find something that I didn't like about it. There was nothing I disliked about that movie.
What I love about horror is there's movies like Frailty. I know Frailty had big name actors in it, but there's movies that come along that are like low budget horror, that, just like Halloween, that again, because horror is not as mainstream, and a lot of your, like your mom and dad are probably not going to see the new Halloween movie. It's not going to be as mainstream as most movies. You can find so many hidden gems with horror because of that. Movies come and go, like The Loved Ones. There was one a couple years ago, Hell House LLC. But like, if you go see The Loved Ones, you'll fucking love it. There's all these crazy ones that just fly right under the radar, and you see them, and there's potential with every one of them to be fucking awesome. But again, most of the other, we are just horror people in general in comedies, but like you don't find as many gems because most of them become
really big. Sure.
So you know what you're getting yourself into. Horror, you never know, man.
You don't get House of the Devil and things like that.
Right,
Don't
exactly.
ever get big.
Yeah, exactly.
But they're wonderful films.
Yeah, so
awesome. You want to rattle off a list of any honorable mentions?
The hardest one for me, it took me a solid 20 minutes, pure misery, was The Conjuring. I loved The Conjuring because I really don't get into that type of horror. I don't really care about the haunted house thing, really. I don't really give a shit. I I know I like Paranormal Activity and shit, but I'm just saying like that whole, weren't there like a million of them? There was like The Conjuring, and then it spawned a ton of other spin-offs, and I remember grouping it in because I didn't see it when it first came out, so I started grouping them in with all of them. And then I think I saw it on some list. It's like, no, seriously, you need to see this. And I was, you know what it was? I think I saw the fact that The Conjuring was the first ever movie to, when they tried to get it reduced from an R to a PG-13, they were flat out told by the committee or whatever, like, no, it's too scary. And I was like, excuse me? Are you threatening me? So I immediately watched it and was like, oh shit.
I can remember you, that was during that time where there was a lot of big horror movies, blockbusters, and a lot of them were garbage. And we kind of lumped that one in with those other ones. And I remember you reading that. And then I can remember driving, I believe, to work or home from work one night. And I was listening to, I think actually Slash Films podcast. And they did a best horror movies of all time, sort of like what we're doing here. And The Conjuring was on both of the guys' list. And I remember, I think, talking to you about it, and then you had been reading about it, and it all kind of came to a head. And then I didn't see it for a long time after that. But
it's just that's fucked up. I mean,
that's one of those movies. Those movies I enjoy, but barely.
Yeah,
because they're right on that edge of
so tense.
Yeah,
but that was my one. That was so hard to leave off the list.
Oh gosh, well I got about 25. So really, that was the only one.
Well, for me, like I kind of mentioned, when we make these lists, it's once you find that elite 5, it's so hard to find.
I thought you were gonna put 3 extremes in your top 5.
Dumplings disqualified that. Dumplings absolutely disqualified. There's gonna be one person that's seen it and he's gonna be like, he's fucking right. He's fucking right. It's absolutely horrifying.
No, I mean, you mentioned earlier Final Destination, again, something that just stays with you. Yeah. Fun. The Descent, Session 9, 28 Days Later, Let the Right One In, Blair Witch, Suspiria, Audition, Stir of Echoes, Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Man, okay, so my wife the other day, we were having a conversation about which movies scared you the most in your life, and I told her, I said, you know what's weird? In 5th grade, we watched Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That was great, and that made us think, and we talked about it. Probably took that walk to DQ, got that large cookies and cream blizzard, and had a real good talk about it. That's adorable. What's not adorable is renting the remake and watching that when you're in 5th grade, because that was fucking terrifying. So then that night, I'm like, I can't go to sleep. I'm going to be a goddamn alien. I'm going to die. I'm going to be a pod person. It's over.
That movie was so influential. And it was one of the first real like horror movies that I remember watching all the way through.
Well, bold decision to show that to 5th graders, but I mean, I guess I
Bless
get
our
it.
Teacher.
He was a beast. Was he?
Yeah, he was.
I mean, he was a beast. But you definitely a beast, but you can't really hit the podium with a baseball bat. That wouldn't work in 2018. Remember that?
I do. But he also took us to get lunch, which you also couldn't do now.
No.
Imagine a teacher taking 2 5th graders out to lunch. That was like the best thing ever. If
you got like the 100 math problems in a row right, you got free lunch.
Yep.
That was awesome.
Yeah, you won that a lot more than I did, but we won't talk about that.
That was always hilarious. But but that was man. But I just couldn't believe he showed that. And that was great, though. He was smart to show the original and not the remake. Because I was in over my head, and we had a hookup at a video store. We were super tight with the guys that worked there, so we could get any movie we wanted, which, whatever. That's the ultimate thing when you're a 5th grader, right? So I'm like, oh, yeah, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Fucked. Absolutely fucked. I did not sleep for like 2 days. And I don't know why. It just, again, the effects maybe were too basic in the 1920s one or whatever when the original. It just was, you were okay with it. It was cool. Not cool. Shit from the 90s. But
all right, that feels like a good place to wrap it up. Unless you've got something else.
Just classic Invasion of the Body Snatchers. No, man, we love horror. This was kind of a bit of a spur of the moment thing because we knew we could get a little creative because Zach's out with the baby. Mm-hmm. But yeah, man, we thought it would be a cool idea. Hopefully, you guys liked it. I know people have actually been asking about it. So if you guys liked it, let us know.
Yeah, let us know.
We did a really kind of a basic overview. And we've had a few that we've wanted to talk about, actually. So who knows?
The Purge might be on the horizon down the road.
It's a super interesting one when you look into it. There's a bunch of them, man. That's the thing about horror. There was a million different tangents we could have gone down with all of these, but you just hesitate the whole time because you're like, man, that's an episode in itself.
Absolutely.
You could do like a 15-parter on The Exorcist.
Oh,
Jesus.
Absolutely. There's a lot behind that
It's a
film.
shit show. So,
All right. Hope you enjoyed it, guys. See you later.